Hello and welcome to episode 13 of Entertainment of Excellence, the podcast where we talk about films, TV, all of it. Hi, I'm Ollie.
I'm Thom.
And I'm Ben.
And today we're going to be talking the 2017 psychological thriller You Were Never Really Here.
Indeed.
This will contain spoilers. Thom, do you want to give a synopsis?
Okay. So, it's about a war veteran called Joe, who is also like a hired vigilante, who goes to save a girl from a child sex trafficking ring. And when he does save her, it turns out that this governor, that was like, she was his favorite. It's pretty grab. This governor gets annoyed basically that his favorite child prostitute has been taken, so he tries to kill everyone involved with like the rescue, I suppose. And then it's about Joe trying to get the girl back and save her from him. Pretty simple plot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least in an overview.
Yeah. So, usually I look at the most common questions about the film, but really the only big one that isn't just like, well, is there going to be a sequel or something, which I don't think there is, because it was it was based on a book or a novella by the same name in 2013, and there hasn't been any sequels for that, and I don't see any sequel possibility for this. So the only other question is the other classic, can you explain the ending? There's not really much to explain. The only thing is that the very last scene where Joe and the girl Nina are in the diner, there's a shot where she goes away and he grabs a gun and shoots himself in the head and dies, and there's blood everywhere. It gets on everyone, but nobody notices him. The waitress drops off a receipt for him that's got blood all over it. Nobody notices he's died, and then Nina comes back in. He's just asleep. So it's kind of a surreal representation of just him like having suicidal thoughts. There's nothing. There's some theories that are like, I don't know, he like actually killed himself, and when Nina comes back in, that's just like an idealistic representation of what would have happened, but I don't really think it's that deep. I think the focus was more on the fact that everyone was ignoring him in that surreal scene, so that just kind of says that society just sort of ignores when traumatic events happen, which I think is one of the biggest themes of the film, where people just ignore traumatic events happening. So, like, for example, Joe himself suffers from severe like PTSD, and from his childhood and from his past in the military and stuff. And then like the girl Nina kind of mirrors that, in that she's been like trafficked and turned into a prostitute basically. And then later in the film she like slits someone's throat. And I guess there's a sort of loss of innocence there, which is kind of cool. But I guess before we dive deeper into the themes of the film, we'll just what were your impressions of the filmmaking and directing and everything?
I thought it was brilliant. I mean, like, just the cinematography was really good. There were some beautifully shot scenes. Like the lake scene, I thought that was amazing. Just the way it was done. It was really great for me.
Yeah, I think it's a really
I'm
cool,
trying to think, like, the
distinct
soundtrack was really good. It's done by Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead, the guitarist, but it was actually like it was completely different to what I would have thought he'd write, if you know what I mean. It's not the kind of music I thought Johnny Greenwood would do, but it was really good. It helped, like, with the almost jarring kind of tone, and so the soundtrack really helped. And obviously, Joaquin Phoenix's performance was just really good. And I actually liked the slow plot, or the slow pace even. Some people say that maybe it should have just been a short film, but it really helped you kind of delve into the mind of Joe and what his motivations are and his trauma. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I agree that sort of the cinematography and soundtrack definitely helped enhance the themes of him sort of being excluded from society and obviously dealing with his psychological issues. And also really enjoyed Joaquin Phoenix because I think there are definitely some similarities to his performance in Joker, but also the poignant scene where he was in the river with his mum, but then you also see Nina. I think that was definitely one of the highlights in terms of cinematography and just sort of conveying the message of his own exclusion and his own internal issues.
Yeah, this whole cinematography is just amazing, but also I think the use of sound design was also really good because what?
What's going on with Thom?
Has he just left?
Because it's just us two.
Okay, so
the original podcast.
He's no longer a special guest. He's been kicked off. So anyway, I was saying about the use of sound design because there were points where it would sort of alternate between like visual action on screen and then more just like reserved, focusing more on like, I guess, emotions with the sound and everything, because there'd be parts where there are parts where it's like total silence, but there are also parts where there's no dialogue, but there's like a mix of like Johnny Greenwood's score and some sound effects that just kind of create this sort of atmosphere that really enhances the sort of emotional impact the characters are meant to be having.
I don't think.
Sorry. My audio broke. It turns out the computer just decided to automatically put the master volume down to 0. Why? Carry on.
Oh, you know,
so I gave like a really big thing about. I did a really big thing about what I really liked about the film and cinematography and everything, and you didn't hear any of it. Oh, you did hear that?
Yeah. I think so.
Oh, then okay, that's
why he's so loud. But I don't think I was as much of a fan of the slow pace. I know it was sort of reflective of his own internal struggles, and it made it. It sort of gave a deeper analysis of character development of Joe. I think like the ending, it sort of culminated, and I think I understand people who have criticisms of the slow pacing, and I wasn't a huge fan of it myself, but I don't think it was that destructive in the grand scheme of things. I still really enjoyed the film.
Yeah, like you could have had it maybe a little bit shorter, maybe like it's an hour and a half. You could have maybe done it in like, I don't know, an hour and 10. But a lot of the slow pacing, to be fair, is more character development, and as I said, with the scenes where it's not outright action. It's focusing more on the sound design, the score, and the emotional connection. So yeah, it gets I don't want to say it gets annoying. It gets noticeable at some points, but I don't really think you could cut it down too much, because that's really what makes it what
for me
is.
it was only the start that I felt maybe could have been a bit faster, but
Yeah,
I think everything after halfway through, I thought the pacing was good.
Yeah.
But the start, I think, partly it did take a while for stuff to happen.
Something else that I did like was, it was, as we were saying about the like character development, and also I'm sure we'll touch on sort of the ambiguity surrounding like underlying themes or theories that people have about what if there was like if it was all a metaphor or something. But something else was sort of how no other characters were featured that prominently in it, because like Nina, I think she only had a couple of lines. I mean, obviously there was the like countdown to mile 22 there, but and then his mum as well. She didn't have like, a huge role in it, but it also I think it could have easily quite excessively sort of relied on flashbacks to his past and the Gulf War, but it did it effectively, but it didn't do it to the point where it's sort of detrimental to like the impactful nature of evoking these emotions towards Joe.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there were some flashbacks in the film, but it definitely didn't overly rely on them. It was it kind of focused more on his reactions to things that have happened to him in the past, rather than focusing on the things that happened to him in the past, if that makes sense. So like you do see shots of him suffering from PTSD, and there's cutting back to his childhood or whatever, but then there's also a lot of like delving into, there's just like subtle things that he does which are obviously influenced by what's happened to him in the past. So for example, when he finds the people who killed his mum, he shoots both of them, but one of them doesn't die outright. So he kind of just goes up to him, interrogates him a bit, but then kind of he gives him a pill to help with the pain, and then there's some music on, and they both have a little moment where they sort of sing a bit, and then he holds his hand as he dies, which kind of shows that whilst he's obviously prone to violence because of his past, he doesn't want to do it, and I think that's probably because of his trauma. You can definitely tell that, and there's definitely a connection there between the audience and him.
Yeah, because a lot of the time, as I was saying, they didn't explicitly show what happened, but I think they did a good job in showing sort of how he's become almost immune to pain, like the scenes where he's got the plastic bag over his face, he's sort of screaming into it. And there's also the scene not right at the end, but after, when he's in the house and he's walking down the corridor, there's brief flashes of I think there's one of his childhood, and then just different. Some of them are lots of we've been shown throughout the film, but then there's also sort of references to his own past. And as you were saying, it's more focused on his reaction to that rather than the actual events that happened.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the whole story itself isn't the most complex. It's just this. I think, and it's also been done before a few times, where you've got a sort of traumatized mercenary who has to go and do something in this case, pick up, rescue. Well, it starts off that he has to rescue this child prostitute and destroy the trafficking ring. But yeah, definitely the crux of the film is more about how he is as a person and how he interacts with, I guess, these stressful situations as well, because it's odd that he uses guns quite a bit, but the main thing he does to kill people is a hammer, which seems to be like an extremely violent way of killing someone when you could just shoot them once and be done with it. But no, he's using a hammer very violently. But it's also very, very clear that he doesn't enjoy violence. And especially that scene with the dying hitman. I think the dying hitman. That was very powerful. It kind of made him a lot more human, but also, I guess, just expands on his character.
Yeah. It shows that he isn't a fan of being so violent, but because obviously talking about like using the hammer, and you see his dad in the flashbacks using I think it's the same hammer. So it's kind of saying that he's a product of his past, maybe, and that he didn't want to be this way, but he was kind of made that way. And because, I mean, obviously he isn't happy with who he is, because he's constantly throughout the film is kind of, he's always on the edge of suicide. So you'll see him quite often, do a suicide attempt and then stop at the last second, like putting his head in front of a tray and then pulling it back, or putting his head in a plastic bag and then taking his head out at the last second, stuff like that.
Yeah, but also the thing about him using a hammer sort of presents him as an anti-hero to an extent, because there's the references to, and his mum's talking about in Psycho, then he almost has those moments where he's sort of like threatening or imitating to kill her, but I guess that's sort of why some people have theorized that might have been a possibility for what actually happened. It definitely sort of presents him as relatable, but he's not necessarily someone that you can get behind all of his motives, but that does build in with the sense of him being like mentally volatile and having sorts of conflicts about his past.
Yeah. I guess, should we go into some of the theories? Because there's some good ones, but then there's some really weird ones. Which I'm not sure we can get behind. I'll let you explain, Tom.
Yeah. So, I mean, I prefer the nice one, where he does save this girl, and then at the end, he was kind of fantasizing about killing himself, but it ends with the girl saying, like, "Shall we go outside? It's a beautiful day." And then he kind of says, "It is a beautiful day." And for me, that's him saying that even after all this violence and trauma, that maybe he can move on with his life and do something fulfilling and, be happy with this girl. There are also not so nice theories. Do something, for example, there is an incest theory. Ooh, all you fans of incest, listen in. I hope that's no one.
Oh no.
And the whole time it's about his incestuous relationship with his mother, and the flashbacks were when his father found out and was going to be violent but didn't do anything to stop it, and that this girl represents his mother, and the government sex ring his dad's like keeping her away from him, but that doesn't make sense. Oh, and apparently this is so obvious when in the lake scene, which is like one of the most beautiful scenes in the film. In it, like first you see his mother in the lake, and then it switches to the girl. So obviously it means they're the same person. It's like, what? Even if that was true, he's literally like saving this girl from being raped. It's like, I don't know. So, for me, it doesn't seem right.
Even if
also makes the film a lot more depressing.
Yeah. Even if the girl and his mother aren't the same person, as that theorizes, I think it's still important that she's sort of an intrinsic part of him. Because even if you look at like the poster, it's almost symbolic, because the scene in the lake where you see her floating, that is sort of inside of him. So I definitely don't agree with like the incest theory, but there is definitely something that could be applied to the film about her and her relevance, even though she doesn't necessarily have massively major role in the actual order of events in terms of her own, in terms of how much she's actually in the film and her dialogue.
Yeah.
There's one of the complaints I saw was that many of like all characters except Joe were used as an emotional device for the audience, like that you never find anything out about them. And I think that's a fair criticism, like that it is true that you don't really know anything about the other characters except Joe. But I think that's because of the film's focus, and it is more about exploring Joe and his past traumas and PTSD and stuff. So I think it makes sense, but I also understand and slightly agree with the fact that I guess no other characters are properly looked into.
Yeah.
Which could have like made up the film's runtime if you cut down the pacing, and then, although I don't know how you do it. Maybe that would ruin it. Don't listen to me.
Yeah, I don't think the incest theory holds up because, well, it holds up, I guess, by its own logic, but for me it doesn't make sense because, especially with the lake scene, so his mother's there and she's sinking, and then suddenly she turns into the girl, so that obviously means that she's the girl. I think it's more like it's meant to represent more that he couldn't save his mother, but he could still save the girl. You know, something like that.
Yes.
You know, maybe
that was more for me. That was him like waking up and going like, "Oh, I need to save her," and then obviously his devastation when he finds out that actually she's killed her captor already, and maybe she's lost her innocence because of that.
Yeah, because we are talking quite a bit about that scene, but I think it was,
and that was one of the best scenes. Yeah.
Just visually, it looked amazing. In the context of the film, it was sort of like, I wouldn't say like a climax, but sort of like a central point, maybe.
Yeah.
Because also, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, at the end when sorry, we're sort of jumping around here, but when Nina at the end says that, well, it's a beautiful day. Maybe the reason that he finds that so impactful is because he thought she'd like lost her innocence or something, but then at the end when she's just like, he's obviously quite depressed, and because of all that's happened, all this trauma, and they just literally had a conversation 2 minutes before that says neither of them know what to do, but she's just sort of down to earth and saying it's a beautiful day outside, and he sort of agrees. He's like, he thought all hope was lost for her, but then she's still like thriving, I guess, and so it sort of gives him the motivation to get back on his feet and sort of look after her, I guess.
Yeah, I think just like the lack of clarity in the ending. Sort of, it's inevitable that there's going to be some far-fetched theories about. Well, I didn't anticipate quite the extent of what we found out in terms of what people thought sort of happened, but sort of it leads to this debate about his character development and then any other sort of external factors that contributed to that. Maybe not to the extent of his mum, and I don't know.
Yeah. So, I guess let's just sort of break it down, I guess, and say what sort of themes there were running throughout it, because there was definitely a very major theme of dealing with trauma, I guess.
I think that is like the theme.
Yeah, because obviously it's a major part of Joe's character, and it's his motivation for saving and staying with Nina. But then I'm just trying to think that there seemed to be some other themes sort of going alongside it. So like there was a lesser one that's sort of piggybacking off that people don't, that society in general doesn't acknowledge, like when trauma happens or something bad really happens, because obviously the end, and I've already spoken about this, where he kills himself in this sort of surreal scene and nobody notices, which sort of represents that. But then there's also just, I don't know, the way it was done when it was, at the time, it was assumed that he was the girl's father, the state senator, had killed himself. I don't know what it was, whether it was like the shots or something, but it just kind of gave this impression that nobody really cared. And then also, I guess, the fact that right after that, the police come in and take the girl away, and he's like caught and everything. I don't know. Maybe it's just like, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Should we,
Yeah.
let's move on and talk about. Do you want to talk about how the action is? Well, action in air quotes. Have we talked about that? The different ways it portrays the
so.
like violence and stuff. So, I mean, it does it really well all the time, every time. So, in the scene of like the like house with all the child prostitutes in, the action is shown through black and white CCTV footage, and it will often actually cut away when Joe is being violent. And I mean, I don't know if, I mean, you could look into it and say maybe it's Joe's trying to block it out from his mind and doesn't like that part of him or whatever. But it does really kind of accentuate it, and it cuts back, and you see what's left and stuff. And that seems like really impactful, especially when he goes in and like kills some guy, and then a small girl walks out of that same room, and you're like, oh, wow, that is awful.
Yeah.
And then there's also the scene where when the police officers come and take the girl, like one of them takes him, and then Joe ends up fighting with the other ones, and they end up kind of struggling on the floor, and then you see the action through the camera pointed up at the ceiling, like a cracked mirror for a ceiling. So that's really cool as well.
Yeah.
And then in the final thing, when he goes to the governor's house, it has a long string of establishing shots and Joe walking through them to kind of show the, him creeping in kind of thing. And there's no soundtrack, which actually works really well, even though the soundtrack is brilliant. And then that also, you only see him just after he's kind of whacked them in the head with a hammer. So yeah, that was also really good.
Yeah.
We've said the soundtrack's good, but have we actually described it?
Not in depth, no.
It basically it uses like a lot of the sounds around the city and stuff. So there was one of them where it sounds almost like a drill or something, but kind of acts as like the beat, and then it goes into the, I guess, more melodic part. So there's a lot of stuff like that, and using the sound, which obviously throughout this film the director does, because there's barely any dialogue. It's all about, you know, it uses sound a lot. You know, for trauma, calling back to trauma. That I mean, I'm just remembering like random shots, like when he's passing the chocolate bar to the girl when he was in the army, and then like straight after she gets shot, just because some boy wanted the chocolate bar. I don't know. It is. There's a lot of use of sound, like the counting down that the girl does, and then I think Joe also does a countdown at one point when he's in the lake.
Yeah,
if my memory serves me correct.
Is the counting down for? Because I've seen that question. Like, what is she actually counting down?
Somewhere I saw that, because obviously for child prostitutes they basically drug them up, so they have no idea what's going on. So one thing was saying that it was like the length until she kind of gets her almost mind back then, I guess, or you know, full control of herself, because when the drugs have worn off. So some people think it's counting down from that.
I think in the lake it was probably him counting down until he dies, to be honest, because he was kind of going to kill himself. He was just going to drown himself, but then he goes back up before it reaches 0. So
another theme that I picked on was sort of his own, not really love, but there's that one line where he's asked, "Do you have any children?" And then it's almost as if he's sort of viewing Nina as his own child, and then he's almost feels like it's his sort of destiny to rescue her and put things right, which also links back to when you see the dead body in the house and there's a loss of innocence there, but then it still continues when in the last scene, you know, when she's sort of saying it's a beautiful day. So he's sort of got an element of protection for her that he's almost been robbed of in his own personal life, which also you could link to him and his mum, because with quite a few depictions of like when you sort of have the protagonist looking after sort of an invalid elderly parent, not necessarily that she is, but like in Joker, it's almost as if the mum is manipulating the child and sort of not grateful for what they're doing. Whereas this relationship, I'm not saying it's quite to the extent of incest, but it's definitely more cordial, and it's almost as if maybe that was an incentive behind, if he did kill her, he almost felt as if he had to, not because they weren't close, but they were almost too close and she was too supportive. So maybe there's some sort of theme to do with his own love, which is to do with his character development as well.
Yeah, you definitely got the idea that he was sort of going to, well, after the film ends, he was going to become her sort of parental figure and take care of her, because in his own childhood his father was abusive and stuff. So yeah, I'm not going to say any more before I embarrass myself again.
There's so many things in it that you want to talk about, but like have no idea how to. I don't know how to explain it. It's obviously not like a blockbuster or whatever. You know, it's more air quotes art house. I'm not exactly like an art house master or whatever. That's just what I've heard, that this is technically an art house movie. So that means that it is more about presenting themes and also trying to look visually amazing and stuff like that. So it means there will be a lot that you want to talk about, but obviously it can be more difficult, I suppose, to do so because...
What was the budget for it?
That is a good question.
Apparently, the worldwide gross was just over $9 million, and it's got a pretty high Metascore, 84, but it's quite divisive in terms of the reviews.
Oh no, wait, no, that's domestic. That's how much it got. That's not the budget. Rubbish.
2.5 million.
Come on. No, that's what I saw. But if you look at, that's what it actually grossed domestically. It's a trick.
It
just says tiny.
You Were Never Really Here made 2.5 million domestically on a budget that was undoubtedly less. So
what is the budget? Because why doesn't it have the budget? Financial information.
Show us your budget.
Give me the budget.
So the question would just be like a quick little Google search.
I don't think it was that. It can't be that high. Yeah, it's so secret. No one can know the budget if You Were Never Really Here. Yeah, maybe it was never really financed.
Oh
no.
Yeah.
Why doesn't it say?
Let's
the main. I assume the main budget will have been like the lake scene and injury.
Yeah. Well, let's move on, and if we find it out, we'll post it on social media for everyone who's interested.
But going back to the reviews, I definitely don't think it deserves. I've seen quite a few saying like, "I wish I was never really here when watching this." But they're mostly to do with the pacing, or the just sort of they didn't really know what was going on. I definitely don't think it deserves that, but I can understand if you were somehow sort of confused or you wanted a definitive answer on his own motives, his own struggles, and the ending, what it means. If you're more of a person who wants it set in stone, then I can understand why you would have that criticism, but I don't agree with it as such.
It's definitely quite a complex movie, and if you just want some quick entertainment, then it's definitely not for you. Especially with the pacing and stuff, because you have to be not so much patient, but like perceptive of why they're doing the things they did, because the obviously the quieter moments with quieter audio and quieter like long shots. Did I just say short long shots? I mean just long shots. It's for emotional impact rather than anything else. So if you got a bit of patience and you understand why like silence is used for effect, for example, there's quite a bit of that, then I'm sure you'll probably enjoy this. But it's definitely not a quick action thriller like, I don't know, Mile 22.
But that's also quite interesting because despite the slow pacing and you're saying it's not a quick action film, the runtime is relatively really short compared to some of the other things we've watched. And it's not even as if we've watched any sort of 3-hour blockbusters, but I guess that if it is based on a novella, as you said, maybe the limited source material contributed to. They sort of felt that they had to pace it a bit slower to compensate for the not lack of story, but just to make sure that it could actually get up to feature-length film.
Yeah.
Runtime.
I don't know. Do you know how long the novella was?
No.
we're gonna look it up, and it's just gonna be another question where we can't know the answer.
That'd be impressive if the novella didn't have didn't have a known length.
You say
It's about 90 minutes.
90-minute read, or
yeah, it means
pretty
90-minute
audio
read.
book.
It is 112 pages, so around the length of
Oh.
Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Mice
so...
and Men.
God.
So not that short, but did you say it's from 2013?
Yeah.
The book.
Quite interesting how I'd sort of expect it to be an older one, but 4 years after it's made into a film.
How come?
No, I can see why you'd think that. It feels like I don't know. I can't really put it into words. It feels like it's a bit like timeless, I guess. Like
Yeah.
Like you could imagine it being written in, I don't know, the 90s or whatever.
The Gulf War was like early 90s, so
yeah,
maybe like early 2000s or something, but I don't know.
But yeah, it's a bit odd that it was only just a few years before it was made. Like,
Yeah.
but
It's interesting that the book is apparently extremely fast paced. That's just interesting.
Nice. Cool. So, shall we wrap it up and give our ratings then? Because we could go into a lot more detail, but to be honest, I don't think we're
not qualified.
Yeah, we'll just embarrass ourselves again. So yeah, let's. What would you rate it?
I'll go first. I would give it a solid 8.
Nice.
I'd give it a 7.5.
Oh, I was also going to go 7.5. I think because
some lovely thirds.
Yeah, I'll have to round to decimal places, but no, it was effective and everything, but I don't think it was enjoyable, and there was definitely quite a lot to dissect, but I don't think it was quite the level of maybe like, I don't know, being John Malkovich or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that there are
okay. Let me think.
I'm just really generous.
So I was thinking 7.5. Wait, what did I give? What did
8.
I give? Being John Malkovich.
Oh, I'll look it up.
On there, that interval where
on
we
our
look something
website,
up.
entertainmentofexcellence.weebly.com.
Indeed.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking because I was thinking 7.5 at first, but then again when we discussed the themes and stuff, it went up, which seems to happen quite a lot.
You gave it an 8.4.
An 8.4.
Yeah.
We used to always give really high ratings.
8 is fine then. Yeah, it's me giving high ratings. I'll stick with 8 then.
Groovy.
Yeah, no, I'll stick with 8.
Fair enough. Nice.
What are you doing, Ben? 7.5.
7.5.
Groovy.
So,
does anyone have any recommendations?
I do. So
yeah.
Go ahead. I also have one.
So I'm watching quite a few series recently, but I'd like to wait until I've finished them until I recommend. So in the meantime, I'm going to recommend some music, and it's an album. Well, it's like 13 minutes long, and then it's like got the instrumentals as well, so it's like 33. So it's kind of an EP, I guess, called Quarantine Casanova by the funk band Chromeo, which is basically just like a sort of, I guess it's a sort of comedy album based on like the events of being in lockdown and everything. So all of the sort of concept is they're going to take like really annoying and things like songs Clorox Wipe, 6 Feet Away, Stay in Bed and Do Nothing, Cabin Fever. So it's like all of these really negative things about lockdown, but they sort of lyrically transform them into sort of like weird like innuendos and stuff. So so like the whole point of like, for example, the song Clorox Wipe is like on its surface, it's just like, wow, these disinfectant wipes are really, really useful now. But it's sort of like comparing it to a guy who has a crush on a girl, and he's like, I'll be your disinfectant wipe. I'll be useful. I'll be appreciated. I'll be all of these things. And it's really light-hearted. It's fun, I guess, some sort of light in these like weird times. And then most of all, I've been listening to a lot of Chromeo recently. They're really good. It's sort of like somewhere between like 80s synth funk and like 90s sort of G-funk hip hop, with like a sort of more classic disco feel on top. So it's like really upbeat, really, really happy. The the vocals are, so you've got a singer, but then you've also got a guy who uses a talk box for most of the songs. So like with stuff like Roni Got Me Stressed Out, it's like a back and forth between Dave on the vocals and then just like Patrick going completely insane on the talk box. So and then I'll leave it off with this. There's a lyric in Cabin Fever where it's just like, I can't remember exactly how it goes. I could look it up, but I might not be allowed to know. Where it's just like, if you're extremely depressed and you don't want to get out of bed, just imagine we're trapped in the room with you and we're playing this music, which is kind of positive. And also, if you buy it, they're donating all of the 100% of the proceeds to a COVID-19 relief fund. So that's kind of cool. So yes, I would definitely recommend that.
It's extremely funky. I've got it on now.
Yeah. It also, I guess it will sort of serve as a time capsule in like a couple of years' time, where like, because obviously there's been all of this music that's been released because people are trapped at home and can't tour. So just in a couple of years, there'll just be like people listening back and going, "Whoa, do you remember the time when we were in lockdown?" And these guys obviously had a lot of fun making this. Oh, also one thing before I actually allow anyone else to speak, they weren't originally planning on releasing this. They kind of just did these jams, like one per week on their Instagram. So they were just having a bit of fun, but then people really enjoyed them, and so we're just like, "Wow, we'll release this," and they were just like, "No, can do." So, yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Who wants to suggest next?
I'll go next if you want.
Go on.
Well, so as you were saying about not finishing watching anything, it's not that I haven't finished watching this, but it's just sort of releasing episodes every week on Netflix, and it's not perfect in any sense. It's actually getting quite badly reviewed, but it's still fun. It's the Netflix series Snowpiercer, and I know it's based on a film by the director of Parasite, which might be something we could consider for future episodes. It's basically a 10-part series. The basic premise is set on like basically the end of the world, and because there was like great global warming, so they tried to overcome it by sort of putting in place this freezing mechanism, which then introduced like absolutely freezing temperatures so that no one can live on the surface of the earth. So all the remaining humans are trapped on this perpetually moving train, and there's 4 sections of the train. There's first, second, third, and then there's these people who sort of just climbed onto the train as it was boarding. No one wanted them to come on. They're called the tailies, and they're sort of below the proletariat, I guess. And basically, the episodes are better when it's not exploring the train itself, but the class struggles, which I know is something that the director likes to focus on in his films. But the plot in the first sort of few episodes revolves around someone called Leighton, who is from the Tale, and he is brought up to try and solve a murder that has happened on the train, and there's loads of twists and turns, but basically they're all operating under this mysterious Mr. Wolfhard, I think he's called. But at the end of the first episode, there's a twist about him, which I won't spoil. But it, as I say, the episode, it definitely is at its peak when it's looking at the class struggles and more of the character development rather than sort of the goofy idea of fixing the train or they're going to crash or there's an avalanche or something like that. But and it's not, doesn't necessarily have the most compelling characters. But I think as it's gone on so far, I've watched the first, I think, 7 episodes. I definitely say it's gotten better over time. And yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah, I want to watch it. Well, the film.
Yeah.
At least the film.
Sure.
I think I've got a podcast recommendation.
Ooh.
Exciting. So this is for all you nerds and stuff out there. The podcast is called Ain't Slayed Nobody. It's a podcast where they play Call of Cthulhu, the RPG game, and the current like main campaign they're doing, which they're calling Yawl of Cthulhu, is set in the Wild West. So it comes out on second Tuesday of every month. It's pretty small-ish, I think. Small-ish. And they basically just like they play Call of Cthulhu, but it's really well done. Like they do some great sound design stuff to get you in the mood or get the atmosphere right. And the editing is done really well. So I think they do actually cut bits out, but you don't notice. But what it does is it makes it one of the most well-paced like RPG things I've watched or listened to. So, for example, the massive one like Critical Role, for me that was just a bit too slow moving. But what they do here, like the story is pretty well. They do pretty well at keeping it moving, even though they're literally just all like messing around and playing a game. The people on it are funny while also managing to keep the suspense. And I mean, the last episode just ended on a big cliffhanger, and I'm waiting for the next one. I'm very excited. So maybe if you're into RPG games, or maybe if you just want to see what they're about, then have a listen to this, because also not only is it fast paced, but also the episodes are short. They're only about like an hour to an hour and a half. That may not sound short, but like trust me, some like RPG podcasts can be 4 to 5 hours long an episode. So yeah, and it's pretty early on, so you can catch up very quickly. So listen to that and go support them, like join their Discord and stuff. So that's Ain't Slayed Nobody. So there you go.
Cool. We've got 3 different types of entertainment to this.
Whoa,
week.
We've got all of it.
Well,
We do. Can't think of any possible other forms.
Have you recommended a board game yet?
oh no, I'll have to do that.
Then we
sometime.
need to recommend a painting.
Yeah. I'll recommend a poem as well.
Oh yeah.
So, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed. I'm gonna try working on making this outro a bit more streamlined, but obviously I haven't done that yet. So, for for now, if you want to keep in touch with us, we're on Twitter and Instagram, both at EOV Podcast. We have a website, entertainmentofexcellence.weebly.com, weebly.com. And we post like little write-ups of the reviews there. And on social media, we do clips. Might end up doing some other stuff. I don't know. At the moment, it's just clips for like general consumption. If you have something you'd like us to watch or review, please email us. You can do so on the contact form, or you can leave a comment on YouTube or message us on Instagram. You know, we're just however you want to contact us. Also, the last 2 weeks we haven't had any submissions for, well, we have had one, but we haven't got around to doing it yet, for our submissions spotlight section. So basically all that is if you're a creator, if you're like a writer, a filmmaker, a musician, or whatever, all of it, maker, you can send your work in, and we'll give it a review on the podcast for like 5 to 10 minutes. We did one for the country band Crow Buntry a couple of weeks ago. If you want to check that out, it's for what we'd sort of be doing. And most of all, the most important thing is if you have any feedback. If we're doing a crap job, let us know. If there's anything we can do better,
Yes.
let us know. Leave us ratings, leave us reviews, leave us constructive criticism. We're still pretty new and we'd like to get to a decent standard. So, yeah. Thanks for listening. Don't think I've missed anything out. All right, see you.
All right, see you.